Jersey's own Zach Gelb.
Or maybe it's Pennsylvania. Anyhow, it's one of the two, I'm pretty sure.
The Zach Gelb Show continues
On Fox Sports 920, The Jersey.
Wild day in sports. Time in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios is 4:17. This is the Zach Gelb Show. 609-919-9200 is the number if you want to hang with us. MLB trade deadline just passed 17 minutes ago. Here is what we know. Yesterday we found out Andrew Miller is going to the Cleveland Indians. Carlos Beltran, and that was from today, is going to the Texas Rangers. Ivan Nova is going to the Pirates. And for the Mets, Jay Bruce is coming to the Big Apple. Dilson Herrera going back to the Cincinnati Reds. And just a few moments ago from John Heyman, the Mets reacquired Jonathan Neese. They'll keep Verrett in the starting rotation. That is the plan, and they'll use Neese out of the pen. And now joining us on the hotline does a phenomenal job with Gio and Jones, the co-hosts of the CBS Sports Radio Morning Show, and that is my good friend Gregg Giannotti, who joins us right now to break down all this madness. Gio, what's happening, brother?
Hey, Zach, great to be on the show, man. Great to hear your voice again.
Well, it's great to always talk to you, and I last saw Gio at the Super Bowl in, I believe it was San Francisco. Yep, San Francisco this past year, and it's always great to catch back up with you. But let's get to the busy day that was in the MLB with the trade deadline. Let's take care of the Yankees first. Your thoughts on what Cashman did? I loved it with him selling.
Well, it's finally like he got it or someone allowed him to get it. I've been waiting for years for the Yankees to finally adopt this approach, the approach that some of these smaller market teams have used to propel themselves into pennant races, to break long years of losing year after year, and that's to trade some of these giant albatross players, these veterans that are either not worth it to you, aren't signed long-term, guys that are only going to help teams in pennant races for young, controllable talent. And I know that a lot of baseball teams that are in bigger markets don't like to hear that stuff right off the bat. This mentality is finally fading away and finally getting through to the Yankees and their fans that, hey, we're the Yankees. We spend money. We don't sell. We're never out of it. We have to keep these guys to go on some sort of magical run because we saw that 20 years ago. No, you don't need to do that. What you need to do is shed these guys like they have, and you stockpile these prospects. And I understand that every guy's not going to work out, and prospects are just that. They're prospects. But if you have enough of them that you trust, a lot of these guys are going to pan out. Then all of a sudden you've got new stars in the making that are not making a lot of money, that you have under contract for a long time. And then when you're the Yankees, the guys that don't work out in the other holes you could fill, you still have the money to spend. So this is the right thing to do, and I think they're in their farm system right now, one of the best in baseball, and this is something that the Yankee fans should be absolutely thrilled about right now.
I was skeptical after they traded Aroldis Chapman that they would go and trade Andrew Miller, although I was advocating for them to trade Andrew Miller. But you're right. It's all the way that they present this to this fan base, because I was on the Brian Cashman conference call yesterday, and I thought it was clear after they got rid of Miller that they were going to sell. I believe that Beltran was going to get traded before the trade deadline, and he was, but they still wouldn't use the term sellers. I wonder when Cashman talks to the media today if he'll finally admit that they were sellers.
Yeah, and anybody with a brain knows that they are. I mean, maybe he doesn't want to use that word because it sounds derogatory, and maybe there's people out there that have tickets to games in August and September that say, hey, if they're not going to try to win, then I'm not going to go to the game, or someone who's thinking about buying tickets may not. But this is the best thing for the organization. And just because you trade away some guys at the back end of your bullpen, and an aging slugger to another team in your same league doesn't mean that the guys that are on the team are going to quit and are not going to play hard. Listen, if you want to get back to where you were perennially competing for championships, it was not to hang on to some good arms in the back of your bullpen. It was to get the most out of those guys right now in this situation. They did. They got 3 of the Indians' top 20 prospects in the Miller deal. I mean, that's unheard of, to get 3 prospects out of the top 20 of an organization that's got a highly touted farm system for one guy who is a relief pitcher is an incredible job by Brian Cashman. So call it whatever you want. To me, it's progress, it's intelligence, and it's a step in the right direction.
It also couldn't be a better time for the Mets to get the Yankees this coming up this week, starting tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, and this definitely adds a little more intrigue to this Subway Series, which has always seemed to be lacking intrigue over the last few meetings. And, the Mets, I think, are in a position now where, similarly to last year and looking at a guy that it needs to be a savior offensively. And I know they've dealt with a ton of injuries, and I know that, you're looking at Cabrera going on the DL and maybe even Cespedes with the quad now, but to bring in Jay Bruce to reinvigorate this offense, I think, is a move that they needed to make. It is interesting to me, though, because there's a couple of things that, you can't just go hurrah for this. Yeah, the guy's an RBI machine. He certainly is going to be a major addition to just a floundering offense. How frustrating has the Mets offense been throughout the year? But first of all, it's an odd fit positionally for them, because now you're throwing a couple of guys in center field, because you've got Cespedes who's going to be in left, you've got Bruce who's going to be in right, you've got Granderson and Conforto now in center field, which isn't ideal for you. And you're also trading away a guy that we've heard for years and years and years is going to be your future second baseman. And even after the Mets made the deal for Neil Walker, it was, he's going to hang around for a year, then he's going to be gone, and then Dilson Herrera is going to be the second baseman for years to come. Now that's not the case. So that's an interesting thought process change for them. I know a lot of Mets fans were happy that Nimmo didn't end up in the deal because they really took a liking to him. So those are a couple things to be concerned with. But the guy's leading the league in RBIs, and they can't score runs. So that's something that you have to look at first before all the other negatives.
We're talking to Gregg Giannotti, host of the Geo Jones Show on CBS Sports Radio. I would have rather given up Nimmo for Herrera, but I still think that you make this deal. And when you also take a look at the deal, you mentioned the Conforto-Grandy platoon in center field. And how do you think Terry Collins has really handled putting Michael Conforto back up to the big league level? Because if you're not playing him every day, I don't know how much that helps him for the future.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And a guy like that, you have to understand that, a team is going to be looking first at winning every game at all costs as opposed to his development. But, at the same time, it's clearly held him back a little bit. But it's a tough spot for a manager. What do you do differently other than just, sit a guy in Granderson completely that you love? And it's a lot easier for us to say, well, this is the way that you have to go because the guy isn't producing. But, there's obviously some sort of relationship there that he loves, a positive influence he loves there with Granderson. But he's got to understand, too, that, there's that veteran young player dynamic in Major League Baseball. It's going to take a lot for someone who makes a lot of money that's as well-liked as Granderson to be supplanted by, a guy who's had some success, but of course is still a relatively unknown player.
Even after making the World Series last year, and every Mets fan is fortunate for the run that they went on last year, I've not been a big fan of Terry Collins this year. Is he on the hot seat, Gio?
I don't think so. It kind of depends what happens here. I guess every manager in Major League Baseball is forever going to be on the hot seat when there's pressure on them, especially in bigger markets. To me, that question will sort of answer itself over the next month plus here with the Mets, because now, they're clearly going for it again in a big way, and that injury excuse is only going to go so far. So if the rotation gets to a place where they're happy with that, Cespedes comes back and plays and anywhere near what they got last year from him, Bruce comes in and hits, and this team still somehow doesn't get one of the wild cards, doesn't make a run, doesn't get into that division series, then possibly. But it's going to take a whole heck of a lot. And this is why, these seasons it's just, you have to capitalize when you're there. I don't necessarily blame the Mets so much for losing that World Series last year. The Royals were a better team. They deserved it. They earned it. And they flat out won that World Series. But, when you walk out of there, and I did, and the Mets are losing a World Series at home again or losing a big game at home again like they did in 2006. I mean, the first thing that pops into your head can't be, well, they'll be back. Because we've seen this so many times.
Not with this organization.
Whether it's 2006, whether it's led, you can't be saying, well, they'll be back. They're so young, things will be okay. You have no idea what the hell's going to happen in the off season and during the season, and we're seeing that play out again.
What still agitates me, though, with this franchise, and they were clearly in an unfortunate situation with Bernie Madoff, and ever since the Mets have been a frugal organization, I was shocked when Yoenis Cespedes did return in the offseason. But now when the Mets acquire Jay Bruce, people are already looking even further ahead and say, well, Bruce is under contract for one more year. Cespedes is probably not going to be under contract next year with the way the opt-out works, and many people are even speculating now that the Mets won't have Yoenis Cespedes, and this happened before this trade even was made, that the Mets won't have Yoenis Cespedes next year. Eventually, and I know that they're not in a great financial situation, but we need the Wilt bonds to be able to spend. It's New York, Gio.
Yeah, no, of course, and I do agree with that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who live in New York that can't afford New York, and unfortunately the Mets have been one of those people over the last 2 years. So, I can't predict what Yoenis Cespedes is going to do because I didn't think there was any shot in hell that this guy was going to be on the team in 2016. So the fact that, he came back to play this year in a Mets uniform was a shocker to me. I think he's a little bit more of an unpredictable superstar in that regard. And baseball fans and sports fans in general, listen, I would not have a job if there wasn't that passion there. But sometimes I think that their focus is on completely the wrong things at this point. I mean, you want to think about 2017, you want to think about 2018, all you're doing is going to give yourself heartburn because at this point you still have an opportunity to make a significant run in the postseason. I think there's better teams in the National League, but that doesn't always mean that you're not going to get back there and win a World Series. For crying out loud, they should look in their own history. What did the Cardinals in 2006 win 81, 82 games that year and won a World Series, and the Mets were the best team in the National League that year, and Jeff Suppan mowed them down in Game 7 at Shea Stadium? That's the mentality you have to have is, okay, things haven't worked out great this year, but let's be that second-half team that catches fire and rides that wave to a World Series. That's what the Mets fans should be thinking about right now because they have a competitive team when they haven't had one for a majority of their history, and stop thinking about Yoenis Cespedes' opt-out deal for 2017. Relax and enjoy these next couple months.
I just saw the return for Jonathan Neese. The Mets, what I should say is they gave up Bastardo. So basically, Sandy Alderson was able to trade Bastardo for Neil Walker, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, that's true. And, it's funny. When John Neese was gone, I did not think that there was an opportunity for him to come back. It was a weird ending for him and saying that all he was looking for was some good defense behind him. Remember that comment that he made when he went to the Pirates? It seemed like an odd match that he's coming back. But a long man out of the bullpen, someone blows up in the third inning, he can come in with his giant schnoz and clean up the mess.
Wrapping up with Gregg Giannotti, let's do a little football talk. I was at Eagles camp today. We'll also have Paul Schwartz coming up in an hour, a little bit under an hour from now, to talk some Giants. NFC East, how would you rank those four teams right now?
Oh, man, it's just so unbelievably even, isn't it? I wish I could trust free agent pickups that the Giants made more. I wish I believed in building a team that way, and that defense is going to go out there in year one and be so good that they could take that division. But it's hard for me to do that. And the Cowboys' problems, how much do I want to put stock into that? It's not as if every single player is in trouble, but it sure as heck feels like it. I do like where the Giants are, that Odell Beckham Jr. injury not really being an injury yesterday. It was a huge thing for them because it looked terrible. It's so darn close. I'd probably go. I'll go Giants, Cowboys, Redskins, Eagles, and if I put all those teams in a hat and shook them up and came out with a different one, I might even go with that because, and to be honest with you, I'm not trying to be on the fence at this point, just how I feel about that division. At this point, I do think I feel good about the Giants bouncing back. Their defense is going to be better. They're not going to lose as many games in the fourth quarter as they did last year. And I think that Eli Manning's got one more really, really good season in him before we're talking about him in the past tense.
The key for the Giants, I would say, this year is that right side of the offensive line. If that right side of the offensive line could be more of a positive than a negative, I think the Giants win that division.
Yeah, and they can't be blowing games, too. I mean, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. But, I mean, how many games they lose in the last 2 minutes last year? And so, I mean, that's a major factor. And with mistakes from guys like Eli Manning and Tom Coughlin, you wouldn't expect. So I think they come back a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and I do believe that this will be a good season for them. But this is what the NFL wanted, right? When they went to the salary cap and the parity and some of the things they've gone with years and years ago is the fact that it's a toss-up in many of these divisions. You got some teams that you feel like are going to win the division. They're going to be wild card teams. A few that are going to be absolutely atrocious, and then everybody's in the middle. And the NFC East is a perfect example of that. Call it mediocrity, call it just slightly above average, whatever it is, but it's going to be one hell of a ride once it starts.
Before we let you run, just giving you the vibe at Eagles camp today, the players are clearly feeling that breath of fresh air from having Chip Kelly out of town and Doug Peterson now coming back to the Philadelphia Eagles, as he was a coach there for a bunch of years with Andy Reid, and then also was the backup or starting quarterback, and then Donovan McNabb came in. But a lot of people in Philadelphia, I don't know if they love Doug Peterson, but they're happy Chip Kelly's gone. But the big future, and I don't have high expectations for the Eagles this year, is the quarterback play of Carson Wentz, and it's not expected that Carson Wentz is going to see a whole lot of time this year, but if Sam Bradford gets injured, which I just think is inevitable, you eventually will see Carson Wentz. You do a national show. What have people been saying nationally about Carson Wentz?
Well, I think that a lot of people really, really like his makeup and his maturity. Now, what does that mean if you can't play in the NFL? Nothing. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are accountants and lawyers and bankers that seem to have maturity that wouldn't be able to play the position. But the thing that I heard more than anything else, because anybody who's picked first or second in the NFL draft can throw the football, has confidence in doing that, has the arm strength, is mobile enough to deal with some trouble. It really comes down to, is this guy going to be able to make that leap and be able to mature on the job with such a high jump from where he came from, and everybody believed that he did. And for me, it's funny, all these stories that you're going to get out of camp, and you've done this now for a long time, even at your young age, and you know that in the beginning it's all sunshine and rainbows. I couldn't remember any time where a new head coach came in and players on that first or second day were saying, this is just horrific. I can't stand this guy.
Right.
He's like a dictator. My life is terrible. So you take those things with a grain of salt. I mean, even when Chip Kelly was there that first year, I mean, everybody had.
I hated Chip.
I forget one of the quotes from somebody. I forget exactly what it was, but he's going to do things to offense and football that's going to reverberate for years and years.
The innovative thinker.
Yeah, right. I mean, all of these things, and then everybody hates his guts by the end of it. So you don't know what's happening, but as far as what Wentz can be, I think that anybody who sat down and talked to him believed that he's got that special young maturity that you don't get in every quarterback prospect, and a guy that's going to be able to see the NFL and digest the NFL as opposed to reject it.
It all comes down to Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz will decide if the Eagles go back to being what the Eagles were in the Andy Reid era, or if they'll turn into the Cleveland Browns. Real quickly, though, before we let the great Gregg Giannotti run, I see your old friend Tom Coughlin has been named the senior advisor of football operations. When was the last time you did the Coughlin impersonation?
Oh, gosh. Probably, my goodness.
Can you give us a little taste of it now?
2010 was the last time I did. I don't even know if I could. I got to be honest with you. I don't even know. It's been probably a good 6 years. I'd have to listen to him for a good minute and a half. There's only a few guys that I could do right off the bat, and one of them would be the great Joe Beningo for the Jersey listeners that might be listening at any point to WFAN. But Tom Coughlin, I mean, that was great impersonating him in those years where he was really known as a hard, the guy would get all over people, a real jerk. But then when he softened up a little bit, it was tough for me to make fun of him because the guy was too soft.
Gio, you're the best, as Joe B would say. All the love. Thanks so much.
All the love back to you, Zach. Take care, man.